I found the first body on a Tuesday. It was hung up in a rhododendron thicket, the way you'd hang a coat on a peg. Arms spread out, feet dangling a few inches off the ground, head lolled to the side like a broken sunflower. And its face, God, its face was smiling. That's the part one still can't shake. Not a rictus, not a death grimace, but a fulsome, lip-splitting smile. The kind a person wears when they are greeting an old friend at the airport. Even with the eyes gone. Especially with the eyes gone. I've spent 16 years in the backcountry, and I've never seen anything dead look that happy. My name's Kate Caraway. I was a backcountry ranger for the Nantahala National Forest, Kettle Creek Wilderness Area, stationed out of a stone cabin so deep in the rhododendron hell that GPS signals forgot how to work. I'm telling you this now, from a place where the lights never quite turn off, because I need someone to know what happened before the frost comes again. And maybe, if I'm being honest, because I'm hoping that saying it out loud will stop my shadow from bending the wrong way. It was late September when I rolled up the old Forest Service road in a battered green F-150 with a quarter tank of gas and a cooler full of dehydrated meals. The air already had that crisp apple bite to it, but underneath was the permanent smell of the southern Appalachians, wet leaf mold, cold creek water, and something faintly sweet, like a dying bouquet you forgot on the counter. The cabin sat in a hollow at the base of Bear Wallow Ridge, a squat, two-room affair built by the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the 30s. Rock chimney, tin roof, front porch sagging just enough to make you watch your step. A single-barred window faced the trailhead. The door had a hex sign carved into the lintel, mountain folk tradition, the previous ranger said, to keep bad spirits out. I didn't think about it twice then. Now I wonder if it was meant to keep something in. My job that season was solo backcountry management, trail maintenance, campsite rehabilitation, visitor contacts, and keeping an eye on the AT through hiker bubble that had long since passed. I was closing up the district for winter, clearing blowdowns, dismantling illegal fire rings, posting closure notices. I worked alone, mostly, except for a law enforcement ranger named Jeffries who was stationed 30 miles south and checked in on the radio every other day. We used a Forest Service repeater on Buck Knob to punch our signal out. When the weather soured, which it did constantly above 4,000 feet, the signal dissolved into a soup of static and phantom voices. I chalked that up to radio scatter. I know better now. The first week was textbook. I hiked the Kettle Creek Loop with a chainsaw, bucking deadfall. I talked to a handful of backpackers who were grateful for the solitude. I pulled invasive garlic mustard, took water quality samples, and listened to the hermit thrushes etch their flute song into the evening air. At night I'd sit on the porch and watch the mist coil up from the creek like a slow breath from the earth. The quiet was enormous. That's what I loved about it. The kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat sound like a dinner guest who won't leave. There were small oddities, nothing that triggered alarm bells. I found a set of river stones on my doorstep the third morning, arranged in a tight spiral. I figured the last ranger, a guy named Mullins, had left me a hippie welcome gift. I swept them off the porch with my boot and didn't think about it. Later, I noticed a cairn on the Saddleback Trail where no cairn ought to be, a stack of flat rocks right at an intersection, pointing distinctly off-trail toward a dense wall of hemlock. That bothered me more. False cairns can lead green hikers into a world of hurt. I kicked it apart, scattering the stones, and made a mental note to check the trail register for pranksters. That evening, a hiker stumbled into camp pale as milk, claiming someone had been following him for the last 3 miles. "Big guy?" I asked, glancing up from my logbook. "I haven't seen anyone out here since Tuesday." "Not big," the kid said. He couldn't have been more than 22, with a wispy blonde beard and expensive ultralight gear that still had crease lines. Tall, though. Tall and too thin. Something wrong with the way it moved. I'd turn around and it'd be just standing there, between the trees. Not walking, just in a different spot every time. I offered him coffee and the standard ranger reassurance about hypoxic hallucinations and isolation. He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. He packed out the next morning, hiking fast with his trekking poles hitting the dirt like a drum roll. I waved him off and told myself that the backcountry attracts a certain kind of fragile mind. I had to tell myself that. The alternative was letting the tent flap of speculation blow wide open, and in my experience, that tent never shuts again. A week later, the first missing person report came over the wire. A 53-year-old man named Harold Vance had left the Yellow Mountain trailhead for a 3-day solo loop and never signed out. His car was still in the lot. I was ordered to hike the loop with a radio and a daypack, checking side trails and view spots. The search felt perfunctory at first. Adult male, experienced, probably twisted an ankle down a drainage. But the deeper I went, the stranger the woods became. Bird calls dropped off the way a conversation stops when you walk into a room. A cold front settled into the coves, sending ribbons of fog between the trunks. I found his tent on the second afternoon, pitched in an illegal spot right on the banks of Kettle Creek. The fly was ripped from the inside, long vertical slashes, like someone had raked it with a gut hook. His sleeping bag and pack were still inside, no sign of struggle, no blood. His trail journal sat open on the sleeping pad, the last entry smeared with something that might have been creek water. October 4th. Finally quiet enough to hear it. A song behind the wind. I followed the stones to the hollow. I'm not afraid anymore. The smile is waiting. I read that entry 3 times while the radio hissed. I called Jeffries and read it to him. Long pause. Then, copy that, Kate. We'll step up the grid. Probably a mental episode. Stay on channel. Mental episode. That was the word that got thrown around a lot in the days that followed. It was a convenient lid to screw on a pot that was starting to boil. 3 days after we found the tent, I was bushwhacking an abandoned CCC trail that didn't exist on any modern map. It was the kind of trace that only someone with a trained eye would notice, a faint depression in the leaf litter, a few moss-blurred railroad ties used as steps. I was checking it because Vance might have known it, might have used it as a shortcut. The forest there was cathedral old, poplar and white oak with trunks so wide you couldn't link your arms around them. Ferns grew waist-high. The air went completely still. That's when I smelled it. Not decomposition, not the heavy black rot of a dead animal. Something acrid and metallic, like the inside of a freezer that had gone off, layered with a sweet perfume that reminded me of my grandmother's lilac cologne. The combination made my stomach drop a foot before my brain understood why. The rhododendrons were so thick I had to shoulder through them. And then there he was. Harold Vance wasn't on the ground. He was suspended 3 feet in the air, his back arched, his arms outstretched, his legs dangling with the toes pointed down like a diver mid-flip. His carcass was wedged inside a latticework of rhododendron branches that had been woven around him deliberately, twined with strips of bark, so that he seemed to float in a cat's cradle of green. His clothes were stiff with dried sweat and something else. The eyes were gone, not pecked out, not ragged, but scooped clean, as if something had used a melon baller. And that smile, that wide, beatific, utterly sincere smile, frozen on a face that had been dead for at least a week. My radio fell out of my hand and clattered onto the roots. I caught myself on a sapling and threw up, which I'm not proud of, but I'm not ashamed either. I've seen bodies before, drownings, falls, one bad bear mauling, but nothing that had been arranged. Nothing that had been curated. When I could stand straight, I forced myself to do the job. I noted the position, the state of the remains, the location. I photographed everything with my point-and-shoot, and as the shutter clicked, I noticed the tree. The trunk of the white oak to his left bore a carving, fresh enough that sap still wept at its edges. A spiral, bisected by a straight line. A circle with a slash through it, but coiled inward like a fiddlehead. I'd never seen it before, and yet something in my hindbrain recognized the shape as wrong, a symbol that didn't belong to any human alphabet I knew. I keyed the radio. Dispatch, this is 430. I've got a 10 to 54, possible deceased subject. Requesting LE Ranger and Coroner. Code 3. The radio wailed back static that almost sounded like words. Almost. Jeffries and 2 county deputies arrived by mid-afternoon. The extraction was a nightmare, We had to cut Vance out of that woven cage branch by branch while the deputies muttered about cult sacrifice and the coroner's face went gray. I gave my statement, answered a dozen questions, and did not mention the smell of lilacs or the smile. I did show them the carved symbol. Jeffries photographed it with a grim set to his jaw and said he'd pass it up the chain. Probably a poacher's mark, he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, back at the cabin, I dug out the old logbooks from the wooden chest that had sat under the cot for decades. CCC-era records, mostly, yellowed and bound with twine. I'd leafed through them before in idle moments, amused by the formal language. 12 head of deer observed, West Ridge, temperature 48 degrees Fahrenheit. But this time I was hunting for something specific. I found it in a slim, leather-bound journal at the very bottom of the chest, the cover stiff with moisture. The handwriting was cramped and urgent, dated 1934. The author was one W. H. McCready, Backcountry Station 17, Raven Fork District, the same cabin I was sleeping in. The early entries were mundane. Trail maintenance, fire watch. But in mid-October, the tone shifted. October 15th, something wrong with the quiet today. No birdsong, no squirrel chatter from dawn till dusk. The air tastes like a penny. Found a spiral of stones at the door this morning. Must ask the Cherokee man at the trading post what it means. October 17th, Luther Heyman, the fire lookout on Big Stair Gap, was found dead this morning, strung up in a red spruce in a fashion that defies all sense. His expression gave me nightmares. The elder from the Qualla boundary called it Uyaga, an old hunger. He said there is a boundary, and a guardian must walk it, or the boundary weakens. I think I understand now. This station was built on purpose. The last entry was only a single line, the letters pressed so hard into the paper they nearly tore through. I've agreed to walk the path so the others can rest. For God's sake, lock the door on the night of the first frost, and don't answer if it calls with a voice you know. The spine cracked as I shut the journal. Outside, the dark had come down thick and damp as a burial shroud. The kerosene lamp guttered. I locked the door and slid the iron bolt home for the first time since I'd arrived. Then I checked the weather radio. First frost predicted for 3 nights out. I told myself it was just an old man's superstition, but I also rummaged through my pack for the bear spray and placed it on the nightstand next to my sidearm. The hex sign above the doorframe seemed to lean inward now, as if it was reading my thoughts. The next day Jeffries radioed to say the investigation had been kicked up to the State Bureau, and I was to remain on station for another 2 weeks to assist if needed. No other ranger would be sent, budget constraints, and anyway the season was winding down. I'd be alone. I said I was fine with that. The lie sat in my mouth like a rotten tooth. I spent the daylight hours walking the high ridges, trying to lose myself in work. But everywhere I went, the woods had changed. The streams sounded different, a muted, gurgling echo like someone humming through a mouthful of water. I kept finding more spirals, etched into a rock at Humpback Gap, scratched into the paint of a trail sign, even floating on the surface of a stagnant pool in a backwater slough made of pine needles and hair. Human hair. The silence grew louder each day. The thrushes had gone. The pileated woodpeckers stopped drumming. The only sound was the wind soughing through the hemlocks, and in that wind, if I listened too long, I could almost pick out a melody. A woman's voice, maybe, singing through the static. The second body turned up on a Thursday. This one was a young woman from Asheville, a day hiker who'd gone missing 2 weeks before I arrived. Her name was Ellen Massey, and her face had been on flyers at every trailhead. I found her on a ridgeline called the Slabs, seated upright against a rock formation that jutted out of the mountain like a giant's ribcage. Her posture was a grotesque mimicry of relaxation, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap like a schoolchild waiting for a lesson. The same absence of eyes. The same beaming, ecstatic smile. The same carved spiral on the rock above her head, still oozing sap from a wound in the stone, which made no sense at all. This time, I didn't throw up. I stood very still and catalogued the details with a detached professional clarity that terrified me more than the body did. A tiny part of me noted the way her hair had been plaited into intricate braids that couldn't have been done after death, the way her skin had taken on the pale, waxen quality of a mushroom. The smell of lilacs and cold copper filled my sinuses until I could taste it. I called it in. Jeffries arrived with the coroner again, and this time he pulled me aside, his face a slab of granite. "I need you to hear me, Kate. There's talk. The detectives are looking at you sideways because you found both bodies. They think maybe you're losing it. Mutiny of the solo mind, something like that." "I'm not losing it," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "There's something in these woods, Jeffries. It's been here since before the CCC poured concrete." McCready knew. The old Cherokee knew. It's marking a boundary, and those people were put there as signs. He studied me for a long moment. Then he said, very softly, "Lock your door tonight. And tomorrow, I'll try to get you a relief rotation." He never got the chance. That night, the radio repeater failed completely. A storm front slammed into the high country, wind shrieking down the chimney, and when I tried to call dispatch, all I heard was a voice. My sister's voice. Lena died of leukemia when I was 14. I know exactly how her voice sounded, the light Virginia drawl that turned home into 2 syllables. And it said, "Katie, it's so cold out here on the path. Come let me in. I can't find the door." I ripped the radio plug out of the wall and buried it under my sleeping bag. I told myself it was a prank, a sick joke, atmospheric skip, anything. But my body knew better. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely light the backup lantern. The cabin groaned around me, and I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, the kind of steps that test each board as if savoring the creek. The thing outside was tall. I could see its silhouette through the barred window, a distorted smear of black against the moonlit fog, too thin for a man, too tall for anything that walked on 2 legs. Where its head should be, the shadow branched into something like antlers, or perhaps too many arms. I couldn't tell. I yanked the shutters closed and scrambled backwards into the corner, the journal of W.H. McCready clutched to my chest like a shield. It spoke again, no longer using Lena's voice. This was something older, a sound like grinding stone and peat, and it came not from the porch but from inside my own skull. "The first frost has come, little keeper. The path is hungry. You will walk it, or you will be walked." I don't remember deciding to run. I remember the back window shattering as I went through it, the cold slap of the night air, my feet pounding down the trail toward the truck. The world was a confusion of fog and starlight, and I ran with the blind instinct of a deer before a cougar. But the woods had rearranged themselves. Trails I'd walked 100 times dead-ended in walls of thorns. Landmarks I knew, the twisted chestnut stump, the boulder shaped like a whale, had slid a quarter-mile from where they belonged. I'd crest a ridge and see the cabin's chimney poking through the trees, as if I'd run in a circle, though I'd been moving downhill the entire time. I fell, finally, in a clearing I didn't recognize. The ground was bare dirt, packed smooth, and at its center stood a rough stone altar no higher than my knee. Spiral carvings pulsed with a faint phosphorescence, lighting up like embers when you blow on them. And standing in a semicircle around the altar, swaying slightly as if they heard music I couldn't, were Harold Vance and Ellen Massey. Empty sockets, beatific smiles, arms extended toward me in welcome. Behind them, half glimpsed in the dark, were others, older, with clothes from different decades, their flesh mummified but still, impossibly, upright. They were the guardians McCready wrote about, the ones who had walked the path before. The tall thing stepped out of the trees across from me. I won't describe it, not because I'm being coy, but because my mind never stitched a coherent image. It was a smear of absence, a long distortion in the air like heat shimmer on a furnace, antlered and many-armed and wearing the outlines of a smile that mirrored the corpse's exactly. When it spoke, the ground vibrated. 3 are offered, but 3 are not enough. The 4th must choose. Walk the path and keep the boundary, Kate Carraway, or the hollow will spread beyond these hills. I think I laughed. It was the laugh of a person whose last thread of reason had just snapped. "I'm not walking anywhere with you," I said, or maybe I just thought it. I pulled my sidearm and emptied the magazine into the smear of air where its chest should be. The shots were muffled and swallowed. The bullets simply vanished. The thing didn't flinch. It merely tilted its impossible head, a gesture of mild curiosity. And then the song started. The same melody I'd heard on the wind, but full-throated now, a soaring, heartbreaking minor-key lullaby that sounded like every voice I'd ever loved. Lena, my mother, my first boyfriend who died in a car crash, all of them singing harmony. It told me how tired I was, how heavy the years of solitude had been, how easy it would be to lay my burdens on that stone altar and drift into the quiet. I felt my feet move without my permission. I walked toward the smiling dead with tears running down my face, and part of me felt grateful. But a sliver of me, the part that had memorized Macready's last entry, remembered the door. How it had to be locked on the first frost. How you mustn't answer if it calls with a voice you know. I hadn't answered. I had run. And that, I think, was the loophole. I stopped 10 feet from the altar and forced my jaw open. I don't know where the words came from, maybe Macready, maybe some deeper ancestral memory buried in my DNA. But I shouted a phrase in a language I don't speak, something Cherokee, I think, that sounded like Silv Di, a Danddo Asquani. The song stuttered. The corpses froze. The tall thing let out a sound that was not anger or pain but surprise, the gasp of a chess player who realizes they've been checkmated. The clearing folded. I felt the world snap like a rubber band, and I was somewhere else, sprawled on a gravel Forest Service road as dawn leaked peach and gold through the trees. A pair of hypothermic thru-hikers found me babbling about smiles and frost. They said I'd been missing for 3 days. The official report concluded that I'd suffered an acute psychotic break induced by isolation, dehydration, and possible carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty cabin heater. The bodies of Vance and Massey were never found. Neither were the older ones. Jeffries insisted he'd never radioed me about my sister's voice. He hadn't spoken to me since the day before the storm. The carved spiral marks on the trees were explained as old CCC boundary blazes, though I know the difference. I know the shape of a thing that marks territory. I resigned from the Forest Service 4 months ago. I live in a small apartment in Asheville now, with the lights always on and the windows covered. It's mostly okay, except when it isn't. Sometimes I'll catch my shadow moving a half-second slower than I do. Sometimes it will stretch toward the door on its own, like it's trying to leave without me. And every year, when the weather report calls for the first frost, my phone rings from a number that shows up as all zeros. I answer because I need to hear if it's still out there. It always is. A rush of wind through dead leaves, the creak of a cabin porch, and a voice that sounds exactly like my own, whispering, "The boundary's thin, Kate. Soon you'll walk it with a smile." I haven't smiled in 8 months. I'm afraid of what might happen if I do. But what truly keeps me awake in the deep, silent hours before dawn isn't the phone call or the shadow or the memory of those eyeless, beaming faces. It's the small, secret part of me that recognized the song in that clearing, that still hums it when I'm not paying attention, and wonders, with a quiet, traitorous longing, whether walking the path would really be so bad.
If these stories are keeping you hooked, subscribe and stay with us in the dark. Let's proceed with the next story.
The first time I heard the knocking, it came from inside the mountain. 3 distinct thumps, slow and deliberate, with a pause between each that precisely matched my own heartbeat. I was standing on the summit of Cold Spring Bald, 6,100 feet up in the Pisgah National Forest's shining rock wilderness, and the ground beneath my boots vibrated like a struck drum. I radioed it in as possible seismic activity. My supervisor told me I was probably hearing my own pulse in my ears. That was the first lie I told myself, and the first lie the mountain told me. My name is Eli Braxton, and for 8 years I was a wilderness ranger stationed out of the Cold Spring Guard Station, a single-room log cabin tucked into a high-elevation hollow so remote the sun rose 20 minutes late and set 20 minutes early. The district was a crumple of granite balds, black spruce bogs, and rhododendron slicks that swallowed people whole without a ripple. My job was solitary, maintaining a 23-mile trail network, monitoring endangered spruce fir moss spider habitat, and occasionally hiking out to retrieve the remains of a backpacker who underestimated the southern Appalachians' ability to kill you with weather, exposure, or plain stupid luck. I was good at it. I liked the quiet. I didn't mind my own company. That was before the whispers started on the wind, before the dead began walking the Appalachian Trail with empty eye sockets and beatific smiles, and before I understood that the wilderness wasn't empty at all. It only wanted me to think so. I rolled into the station on the first day of October, kicking through drifts of yellow birch leaves that had already begun to pile against the door. The cabin was a relic of the Civilian Conservation Corps, built in 1935 from hand-hewn chestnut logs, with a stone fireplace big enough to roast a hog and a porch that sagged toward the creek like a tired old man. A Forest Service green roof, warped shutters, a single wide window that looked out on a wall of Fraser firs. The key was under the loose floorboard where it always lived. Inside, the air was cold and still, smelling of wood smoke, mouse droppings, and something else, a faint, sweet floral note that didn't belong. Honeysuckle, maybe, but it was far too late in the season. I did my duty checklist with the rhythm of long practice. Radio check with the district office 60 miles away, a scratchy confirmation from Ranger Darrell Yates. Weather report, a high-pressure system locking in, first frost predicted within the week. I filled the kerosene lamps, split a stack of fir kindling, and inventoried the medical kit. The station logbook sat on the rough-hewn table, a thick, water-swollen notebook with a canvas cover. The previous ranger, a young woman named Tess Harlow, had left me a note on a yellow sticky. Mice got into the oats. Check the East Spur Trail for a widowmaker at mile 2.8. If you hear singing after dark, don't investigate. Tess. I chuckled and crumpled the note. I knew Tess. She had a dark sense of humor and a fondness for spooking the new guy, even though I'd been running this district longer than she'd been alive. I tossed the sticky into the fire and forgot it. I shouldn't have. The first 2 days were routine. I walked the Cold Spring Loop with a chainsaw, clearing deadfall left by a summer microburst. I hauled a downed hemlock off the trail, sweat freezing to my forehead. I spoke to a pair of through hikers on the Mountains to Sea Trail, a husband and wife from Ohio who said they hadn't seen another soul in 4 days. I told them that was the point. They laughed. I logged their permit numbers, urged them to sign the register, pointed them toward the next shelter. They walked into the reddening sunset, and I never saw them again. I didn't know that yet. On the third night, the knocking came again. I was sitting on the porch with a tin cup of coffee, watching the fog boil up from the drainage below, when the ground thumped. 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. The coffee rippled in my cup. I set it down and pressed my palm to the cold earth. Another thump, deep and subterranean, like a giant fist striking a stone door far below the roots of the mountains. The sound echoed in my chest, and for a moment I felt a pulling sensation, a gentle but insistent tug, as if my heart wanted to match its rhythm to the knocking. I pulled my hand back, spooked. The thing I never told Yates was that the knocking sounded like a question, and my own heart kept trying to answer. The next morning I hiked the High Ridge Trail to check a known landslide area, and that's when I found the first cairn. A pile of flat stones, stacked knee-high, standing directly in the middle of the trail where no cairn should be. It wasn't a trail marker. It was too carefully built, each stone chosen and seated, and at its peak sat a circle of crushed quartz that glittered in the weak October sun. The thing that made my stomach drop, though, was what lay inside the quartz circle, a single human tooth, molar, with the roots still attached and a smear of dried blood on the crown. I bagged the tooth with trembling fingers. I radioed Yates. He said he'd pass it to law enforcement, but it was probably a weird joke, or a tooth someone lost while hiking, placed there by some granola kid as a nature offering. I wanted to believe him, but the tooth had no cavity, no wear, the root fresh. That tooth came out of a living jaw not long ago. I began to notice the silence after that. The high country is never truly quiet. There's always squirrel chatter, raven squawks, the rustle of voles in the duff. But by my 5th day, the forest had gone mute. No birdsong, no insects, not even the skitter of a chipmunk. The only sound was the infinite sigh of wind through spruce needles, and underneath it, just on the edge of hearing, a low, continuous hum like a distant crowd singing a note in unison. I couldn't locate a source. It seemed to come from the ground itself. That night, I dreamed of a door. It was tall and black and set into the flank of Cold Spring Bald, exactly where no door existed. Stone lintel carved with spirals. The knocking was coming from the other side, frantic now, desperate, and a voice, many voices layered, whispered, "Let us out, keeper. The path is cold, and we are so tired of holding it." I woke up standing barefoot in the creek with no memory of how I got there, water soaking my pant legs to the knees, the hum so loud I could feel it in my teeth. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat by the fire with my sidearm on my knees and every lamp burning, while something paced the treeline just beyond the reach of the light, a shape too tall and too thin, moving with a stutter like a bad film reel. It never stepped into the clearing. It didn't need to. I knew, in a way I couldn't explain, that it was waiting for an invitation. The first body turned up on October 10th. His name was Lucas Tran, a 29-year-old software engineer from Raleigh. He'd been reported missing 3 weeks prior after failing to return from a solo overnight on the Cold Spring Bald Loop. I found him in a thicket of mountain laurel just off the Bear Pen Gap side trail. He was suspended 3 feet in the air, not hung from anything, but woven into the laurel branches themselves. Limbs bent and twined around his torso, his arms, his neck, so that he seemed to float in a green cage of living wood. His head lolled forward. His eyes were missing, the sockets clean and dry as polished stone. And his mouth was stretched into a grin so wide, so ecstatic, that it had split the corners of his lips. The same spiral carving scarred the oak trunk above him. Fresh sap wept from the wound like the tree was bleeding. A cairn of stones stood at the base, quartz glittering on top, and inside the quartz circle lay another tooth. I didn't throw up this time. My body had gone cold and still, an operating system of pure procedure. I called Yates on the radio, voice flat, describing the scene with clinical detachment. He went silent for a long, long moment. Then, "Eli, stay put. I'm sending LE and a coroner. Don't touch anything." I didn't touch anything. But I did notice that Tran's smile was an exact match for the one I'd seen in my dream. The same expression I'd later see on Ranger Tess Harlow's face in a photograph she'd left behind in the cabin. A photo I found that night tucked into the logbook, showing Tess and 2 other rangers at a trailhead, all of them grinning as if someone had just told the funniest joke in the world. I studied that photo until the lamp burned low. The smiles were too wide. Their eyes didn't crinkle. The investigation that followed was a mess of jurisdictional squabbles and strained assumptions. State police, county sheriff, Forest Service LE. Everyone wanted an explanation that fit into a box. Serial killer, cult ritual, drug dispute. They interviewed me 4 times. My story never changed, but their faces did, shifting from professional curiosity to barely concealed suspicion. I understood how it looked: the Lone Ranger, the isolated cabin, the bodies discovered only by me. But then the second body turned up while I was sitting in an interrogation room 40 miles away, found by a pair of hikers on the Shining Rock Ridge. A woman named Miriam Decker, a retiree who'd been missing since August, arranged in a rock cleft with her arms outstretched, eyes gone, smile gleaming. The spiral symbol etched into the stone above her head. A cairn with a tooth. I was no longer a suspect, but I was no longer a ranger either. I was a witness to something that had no category. I returned to the station under administrative leave, pending a psych eval. I went back because I had nowhere else to go, and because the hum had followed me into town, into my motel room, into the fluorescent-lit hallways of the sheriff's office. It was quieter at the cabin. It was patient. The old logbooks were waiting for me. I'd leafed through them before, of course, but now I read with a different set of eyes. The same CC Sierra entries I'd dismissed as archaic now blazed with hidden meaning. A ranger named Augustus Finch, stationed at Cold Spring in 1934, had written in a cramped, erratic hand about the keeper's compact and the door that must never open. He described the knocking, the hum, the song on the wind, the way the forest fell silent before a death. He wrote of a local Cherokee elder, a man named Sequoia Lacia, who told him the mountain was a boundary marker for something old, an entity that had existed before human memory, sealed away by some forgotten accord. The cairns and the teeth, Finch wrote, were offerings. The dead with their smiles were wardens, walking the path on the other side of the door, their bodies left behind as a sign of service. And the ranger, the human stationed alone at Cold Spring, was the living warden who held the key. Finch's final entry was dated October 17, 1934. I have heard the song for 7 nights. It sounds like my mother. It tells me I'm tired, that I can lay my burden down. It tells me the door can be opened from this side if I am willing to walk through. I will not open the door, but I am afraid that I will fall asleep, and the door may use my hand. If you find this, know that the frost opens the seam. Guard it. Do not listen to the voices. And never, never accept the offering. The word offering was underlined so hard the pen had torn through the page. That night, the first frost arrived. I woke to silver feathers of ice creeping across the window pane, and with them came a sound that turned my marrow to water. The cabin door rattling, not as if wind blown, but as if a hand was testing the latch. Then a knock. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. My heart slammed into synchrony before I could stop it. Through the barred window, I saw them. Lucas Tran and Miriam Decker, standing at the edge of the clearing, their hollow sockets fixed on the cabin, their smiles radiant. Behind them, a line of others, some in modern hiking gear, some in clothing from decades past, all swaying gently in unison. And behind them, a tall, attenuated shape that wasn't shaped like anything natural, antlered, many-armed, its body a smear of darkness against the frosted trees. It didn't move. It simply waited while the dead shuffled forward and began to place stones on the porch. A cairn, an offering. For me, a voice spoke. Not from outside, inside my own skull, in the space where my thoughts lived. It sounded like my grandfather, who raised me after my parents died, his warm Alabama drawl filled with love and exhaustion. Eli boy, you've carried enough for one lifetime. The path is gentle. Just open the door and walk out. We'll take your shift. You can rest. I found myself standing with my hand on the bolt. I didn't remember crossing the room. The metal was so cold it burned. I yanked my hand back and pressed my forehead to the rough wood, sobbing. I would not open the door. I would not. The thing outside sighed, a sound like rocks grinding together at the bottom of a river. The dead stopped swaying. The cairn on the porch toppled with a crash, scattering stones and a single bloody tooth. And then slowly, the clearing emptied, the antlered shadow receding into the tree line, the corpses shuffling backward until the frost swallowed them whole. The hum subsided to a faint, plaintive whine. In the morning, I dug a hole and buried Tess Harlow's trail sign. She'd carved the spiral into the back of the wooden directional marker. I found it later, and I burned the sticky note she'd left me. I don't know if Tess walked the path willingly or was taken, but I know her name is probably in the logbook now, if anyone ever looks. I don't work for the Forest Service anymore. I live in a rented room in Waynesville, over a coffee shop, with a radio that plays static all night to drown out the hum. I keep the window cracked even in winter because the frost makes me nervous. The psych eval cleared me, but I know what they didn't ask. Why I no longer smile, why I flinch at the sound of a knock, why I've pulled out every tooth in my head except the ones I need to eat. I got dental implants. The extracted teeth I keep in a locked box, wrapped in lead foil, buried under the floorboards. Just in case. The thing they don't tell you about the wilderness is that it's not empty, it's that it's full. Full of old agreements and older hungers. Full of doors that were never meant to be opened. And every fall, when the first frost touches the high peaks of the shining rock wilderness, I feel a tug in my chest, a pull toward the mountains and a gentle, patient knocking inside my bones. The boundary needs a warden. The path is waiting. I haven't answered yet. But last week, I caught myself humming a tune I'd never heard before, a minor key lullaby that made my roommate's dog whimper and hide. And I realized with a cold, quiet horror that I was humming the song from my dream, the song that the smiling dead sing when they walk. The frost is coming again. And this year, I'm so very tired. The first raven feather appeared on my doorstep the morning after the first frost. It was black as a seam of coal, a perfect primary flight feather, and when I picked it up, the shadow it cast pointed uphill, directly away from the rising sun. I rotated it in my fingers, checking the light, but the shadow stayed fixed like a compass needle aimed at something I couldn't see. I told myself it was a trick of the angle, the low October sun playing games. I've never been good at listening to myself. That was my first mistake, and the mountain knew it. My name is Rory Maddox, and I was the backcountry ranger assigned to the Red Creek Station in the Dolly Sods Wilderness of West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest. Dolly Sods is a place that doesn't behave like the rest of the world. A high-elevation plateau scraped raw by logging and wildfires a century ago. It's a landscape of wind-stunted red spruce, sphagnum bogs that swallow your boots to the knee, and heath barrens that bloom purple with rhododendron in June. In October, the blueberry bushes turned crimson, the larch glowed gold, and the fog rolled in so thick you could lose your own hands. I loved it there. I loved the brutal silence, the way the wind sounded like a distant crowd murmuring through the rocks, the absolute solitude of a sky, so wide it felt like falling upward. I'd been stationed at Red Creek for 3 seasons, enough to know the trails like the veins on my own wrists, enough to understand that the sods kept secrets. I just didn't know they were hunting secrets. My cabin was a one-room affair built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the late 1930s, squat and sturdy, with a rock chimney that drew beautifully and a porch that faced the bare rocks outcrop. I had a propane stove, a single cot, a Forest Service radio, and a logbook that went back to the Kennedy administration. The previous ranger, a quiet man named Hollis, had scribbled a note on the inside cover. "Keep the fire burning at night. The fog listens." I'd assumed he meant the damp got into your bones. I didn't know he meant the fog was literal about its listening. The feather rattled me more than I wanted to admit. I propped it on the windowsill, shadows still pointing uphill toward the ridge, and went about my morning checklist. Radio check with the district office in Petersburg. Weather report. High pressure holding, a cold front pushing down from Canada, second frost expected within 48 hours. I filled my day pack with a chainsaw file, a water filter, trail registers, and bear spray. My job that week was closing the northern loop for the season, pulling signage, locking the privies, clearing deadfall from the last autumn storms. I'd be the only human for 20 miles in any direction. That was the point. That was always the point. The first body turned up before lunch. I was walking the Raven Ridge Trail, a spur that cut through a grove of ancient, wind-twisted spruce, when I noticed the silence. The sods had a particular soundtrack, the whine of winter wrens, the raspy croak of ravens, the constant rustle of heather in the wind. But that morning, nothing. The air had gone flat and muffled, like the world was holding its breath. I stopped, pulling my jacket tighter, and listened. In the distance, faint but distinct, I heard a child giggle. A high, clear peal of laughter that echoed off the rocks and dissolved into the fog. I stood frozen, cataloging possibilities. A backcountry family camped off-trail. A hiker's gear squeaking. A raven mimicking a sound. They could do that, I knew. But this was no raven. The laughter came again, closer now, and it was followed by a voice, small and piping. "Ranger lady, come see. I am not a person who spooks easily. I've pulled bodies out of ravines and talked down hypothermic hikers who thought the trees were speaking to them. But that child's voice raised every hair on my body because there were no children in the backcountry that week. I'd checked every permit, every trail register. The last family had signed out at Bear Rocks 4 days prior. I keyed my radio, heart hammering, and called for any other ranger in the district. Static. The repeater on Blackbird Knob was down. The fog was clotting thick around me now, and I felt a drag at my attention, a gentle pull toward a deer path that branched off the main trail into a dense rhododendron thicket. The giggling came again, right there, behind those leaves. I didn't follow it. Something in my gut locked my feet in place and held them there. Instead, I backed away slowly, reciting the 10 essentials under my breath like a prayer, and when I reached the main trail, I ran. Not my finest moment, but if you've ever heard a voice that shouldn't exist call your title from a fog bank, you'll understand. Half a mile down the trail, I found the man. He was lying on a flat sandstone outcrop known locally as the Devil's Dinner Table, a geological oddity that jutted from the heath like a sacrificial altar. He was supine, hands folded on his chest, legs straight, feet together. His eyes were open, fixed on the sky. No visible injury, no blood, no sign of struggle. He was dressed in expensive ultralight gear, the kind you saw on thru-hikers who'd watched too many YouTube tutorials. His trail runners were still tied. His water bladder was half full. And tucked beneath the collar of his fleece, precisely centered over his throat, lay a single raven feather, black and perfect. I checked his pulse even though I knew. Cold. The skin had the waxy give of someone dead at least 24 hours, maybe more, but there was no rigor, no discoloration, none of the normal post-mortem signatures. He looked asleep, except for his eyes. Those wide-open eyes held an expression I couldn't name at first, something between wonder and recognition, and his lips were just slightly parted, as if he'd been about to speak. I found his wallet in a zippered pocket. His name was Calvin Oakes, 27, from Richmond, Virginia. He'd signed the trail register at the Bear Rocks trailhead 3 days earlier with a cheerful note. Solo overnight to see the stars. First time in the sods. I radioed the body in with the tight, flat voice you learn in training, the one that doesn't betray tremor. Dispatch said they'd send the county coroner and a law enforcement ranger named Tam Greer, but the weather was turning. They might not get a helicopter in until the next day. I was to stay with the body. I didn't stay with the body. I couldn't. Every time I looked at Calvin Oakes's face, I saw that expression shift just slightly in my peripheral vision, a twitch at the corner of his mouth that stopped when I looked directly at him. I'm not proud that I left a deceased hiker unattended, but I also know what my instincts were screaming. I walked a perimeter, flagging the site, and then I climbed to higher ground where the radio signal might punch through. The child's giggling had stopped, replaced by a low, continuous hum that seemed to emanate from the rocks themselves. The coroner arrived the next morning with Ranger Greer and 2 county deputies. They packaged Calvin Oakes into a body bag while I filled out a stack of forms and answered the same question 7 times. Did I see anyone else? No. Did he have any known medical conditions? Unknown. Did I hear anything unusual? I lied. I said nothing but the wind. The autopsy results came back 5 days later, and that's when the ground shifted under me. Greer called over the radio, voice carefully neutral. Maddox, you sitting down? Oakes's cause of death was acute cardiac failure due to massive myocardial trauma. His heart was missing, Rory. No incision, no broken ribs, no wound of any kind. It's like it was removed from the inside out. A long pause filled with static. There was a feather inside the pericardial sac, same as the one on his collar. Lab says it's from a common raven, Corvus corax. They're calling it a medical anomaly. I'm not sure I believe them. Neither did I. That night I pulled the logbook from the cabinet and leafed through decades of cramped handwriting until I found an entry that made my blood slow to a crawl. August 1972, signed by a ranger named Luther Tippett. Found dead man on Raven Ridge, same layout as previous. No wound, feather on collar. Locals talk of an witch raven that hunts these parts. The old woman at the trading post says it's a mocker. When I asked what that meant, she closed her shutters and told me to leave before sunset. Told me to never listen for a child's voice. I'm requesting transfer. The pages after that were blank. Tippett had left mid-season. I dug deeper. My search led me to a microfiche reader at the Petersburg Library on my next supply run, scrolling through newspaper archives until I found a story from 1923. Logging camp tragedy on Dolly Sods. Ephraim Bowles, a timber worker, was found hanged by his fellows near the Red Creek camp after being accused of witchcraft and the death of 3 children. Superstition ran high among the workers. many of whom claimed Bowles could fly in the shape of a raven and stole the hearts of his victims while they slept. His body was cut down and buried in an unmarked grave. Days later, the grave was found empty. Ephraim Bowles. The name tasted like ash. I photocopied the article, folded it into my pocket, and drove back to the station as the sky bruised purple. The fog was already rolling in, thick and white, swallowing the road behind me. That night, the humming woke me at 2:15 a.m. A deep, resonant drone like a didgeridoo played underwater, vibrating through the cabin floor. I lay rigid in my cot, listening, and then I heard it, a child's giggle, right outside the window. My hand found the bear spray, then the pistol. The shutters were closed, but through the cracks I saw movement. A small shape, the size of a 5-year-old, darting between the spruce trunks under a sliver of moon. It moved wrong, too fast, with a jerky stop-motion gait. I pressed my eye to the gap, willing my breathing to slow, and the shape stopped, turned, and I saw its face. It was pale, featureless except for 2 vast dark sockets and a mouth that stretched wide in a grin of greeting. And then it spoke, in a piping voice that was somehow inside my head. "Mama says come play. Mama's lonely." I screamed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I screamed and I fired a round into the floorboards, which was stupid, but the sound shattered the spell. The thing vanished. The humming stopped. I sat awake with every lamp burning until dawn, the feather on the windowsill still pointing uphill like an accusation. The next day I drove to the far side of the plateau, to a ramshackle cabin tucked into a holler where an old man named Roscoe Clower sold raw honey and spoke the mountain dialect thick as sorghum. He was 90 if he was a day, eyes milky but sharp. When I showed him the feather, he recoiled and made a sign with his fingers, thumb between index and middle, a ward against evil. "You got a mocker on you, Ranger," he said. "Raven mocker. Old Cherokee devil, though this one's name is Ephraim. Him and the children he stole. They hunt the high barrens where the fog don't lift. Mockers can't be seen straight on. They live in the corner of your eye. They take the voices of the dead, the lost, the ones you love. They call you to where the ground is thin, and then they take your heart." He spat into the fire. "You can fight it if you know its name. Speak it out loud and it loses purchase. But it knows your name too by now. It'll call you with the voice you can't refuse." I swallowed. How do I stop it? You don't. You just don't answer the door when it knocks. And you pray the frost kills its trail for another season. I drove back to Red Creek with my knuckles white on the wheel, Roscoe's words settling into my bones like cold river water. The frost was coming. Maybe that would me. Maybe. That evening, the fog descended with a vengeance. I could barely see the porch railing from the cabin door. The radio crackled with a voice I recognized. My mother, dead 9 years from ovarian cancer, her soft West Virginia drawl calling my name from the speaker. "Rory girl, it's so cold out here on the path. Come guide me home. I've been lost so long." The transmission ended with a giggle that warped into a child's laugh. I ripped the radio's power cord out of the wall and threw it across the room. I told myself it was atmospheric skip, radio pranks, anything. But my body remembered. For 3 days I stayed inside as the frost painted the windows with silver ferns. I didn't patrol. I didn't respond to radio calls. Not that any came that weren't that voice. I read Luther Tippett's log obsessively, looking for loopholes. Tippett had survived by leaving before the worst of the fog season. But he'd also written something else. They can only take you if you walk to them willingly. The choice is the crack they slip through. Do not consent. Do not follow. Do not listen. I thought I understood. The mocker needed permission. On the 4th night, the frost was so heavy the trees crackled. I had kept the fire roaring, the lamps blazing. Then, at exactly midnight, the humming started again, a physical pressure in the air, and my mother's voice came from outside the door, not the radio. "Rory girl, please. I'm right here on the porch. Your father's here too. We're so tired, baby. Just open the door and let us warm up." Behind her voice, a child giggled. I looked at the barred window. In the edge of my vision, I saw them, Calvin Oakes, standing at the tree line, smiling that vacant smile. Beside him, 3 small figures, children in rough-spun clothes from a century ago, hand in hand. And behind them, a shape that was not a man. Tall, gaunt, draped in a darkness that swallowed the starlight, its arms too long, its head cocked at an angle that was all curiosity. I kept my gaze slightly averted, as Roscoe instructed, and in my peripheral vision I saw the mocker clearly for one shattering second. A pale, drawn face with eyes like black water, and a beak made from the shadow of a raven's feather. It opened that beak and spoke in my mother's voice again, perfectly lilting. "You're so tired, Rory. The path is gentle." My hand was on the door bolt. I didn't remember putting it there. The metal burned with cold. I could hear my mother's breathing on the other side of the wood, ragged and real. Every cell in my body wanted to open that door and fall into her arms. But underneath the desire, a thin, steely thread of ranger training kicked in: situational awareness, decision-making protocol. Consent. I had not consented. I had not said yes. As long as I didn't, the door was a boundary. I wrenched my hand from the bolt and stumbled back. I grabbed the logbook, the one with Tippett's words, and I shouted into the night. "Ephraim Bowles, I know your name. You hanged for your crimes and your body walked away, but I know you, and I do not consent. I do not follow. I do not. Listen." The humming screeched, a sound like metal tearing. The child's shapes flickered and dissolved. Calvin Oakes's body folded sideways into the fog. The tall shape with the beak let out a cry that was not anger but shock, the sound of a hunter who's had the trap turned back on him. And then the fog simply lifted, pulling away like a curtain, and I was alone on the porch under a sky thick with stars, the frost glittering like a field of tiny knives. I didn't sleep. I packed my gear and radioed a mayday at first light, lying about a medical evacuation. A helicopter plucked me out before noon. I never set foot on Dolly Sods again. I resigned from the Forest Service 3 months later. I live in a small apartment in Elkins now, with the windows sealed and a night light in every room. It's been 2 years. I don't hike anymore. I don't listen to the wind. And I rarely look in mirrors because some nights, when I catch my reflection from the corner of my eye, there's a raven feather tucked behind my ear that isn't there when I turn my head. I've checked, it's never there. But it's always there when I'm not looking. Last week, a child giggled in the hallway outside my apartment door. Just once. I froze with my hand on the deadbolt, my heart answering a rhythm I hadn't consented to. I didn't open the door. But I've started finding things: a small stone on my doorstep, a twig bent into a spiral, and this morning, a single black feather lying on my pillow. The thing about raven mockers is they never give up a hunt. They just wait for you to forget. And last night, when I was drifting off, I heard my mother's voice whisper from the vent, soft and warm and full of love. "Rory girl, you've been so strong. It's okay to rest now. Just open the door." I didn't. But my hand, I realized with a slow, creeping horror, was already reaching for the bolt. And that's why I'm telling you this now, because the frost is coming again, and I'm so very tired, and I need someone to remind me that my mother is dead. You'll remind me, won't you? You'll remind me not to smile. I hiked the Alum Cave Trail in the Smokies, and something followed me home. Not physically, not in my car, but when I got back to my apartment 200 miles away, the trail was there. In my hallway, dirt path, tree roots, the exact trail I just hiked, leading from my front door to my bedroom, and it's been growing ever since. Every night, a little longer, a little deeper into my apartment, bringing the forest with it, bringing something else too, something that walks the trail at 3 a.m., something that's getting closer to my bedroom door. My name is Tyler Morrison, and I've been a ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 4 years. I know these trails, know these mountains, know what belongs here and what doesn't. But what I'm about to tell you doesn't make sense. Violates every law of physics and geography I know. And yet it's happening. Right now. In my apartment. 200 miles from the Smoky. August 14th, 2021. I hiked the Alum Cave Trail. It's one of the most popular trails in the park. 5 miles round trip to the Alum Cave Bluff. I'd hiked it dozens of times. Was doing a routine trail assessment. Checking for erosion, fallen trees, hazards. Standard ranger work. The hike was normal. Beautiful day. Warm. Sunny. Lots of tourists. I made notes, took photos, talked to hikers. Everything routine. I reached the bluff around 1 p.m. Spent 20 minutes there. Then started back down. At about the 3-mile mark on the return, I felt something. Hard to describe. A sensation. Like I was being watched. Like something was walking behind me. Matching my pace. Staying just out of sight. I stopped. Turned around. Looked back up the trail. Nobody there. Just forest. Just the empty trail disappearing into trees. I waited. Listened. Nothing. Just normal forest sounds. Birds. Wind. Leaves rustling. I continued down. But the feeling didn't go away. It intensified. Something was definitely following me. Close. Maybe 10 feet back. I could almost hear footsteps. Almost hear breathing. Almost feel presence. I turned around multiple times. Never saw anything. But the sensation persisted all the way to the trailhead. All the way to my truck. Only when I got in and locked the doors did it fade. But not completely. Even driving away, I felt like something was watching from the forest. Something disappointed I was leaving. I finished my shift. Drove home to Knoxville. 200 miles from the park. 200 miles from the Smokies. 200 miles from the Alum Cave Trail. I got home around 9 p.m. Unlocked my apartment door. Stepped inside. And stopped. Because something was wrong. My apartment looked different. Smelled different. Felt different. The smell hit me first. Forest. Dirt. Decomposing leaves. Moss. The exact smell of the Alum Cave Trail. Strong. Overpowering. Like I was still in the woods instead of in my third-floor apartment. Then I saw it. A trail. An actual trail. Dirt path. Maybe 2 feet wide. Starting at my front door. Leading down my hallway. Toward my bedroom. I stood there. Frozen. Staring. Trying to process what I was seeing. There was a hiking trail in my apartment. In my hallway. The same dirt. The same composition. Even the same small rocks and roots I'd seen on the Alum Cave Trail. I approached slowly. Knelt down. Touched it. Real. Actual dirt. Actual earth. Not painted. Not fake. Real trail material, somehow existing on my apartment floor. The trail ran from my door, down the hallway, and stopped about 10 feet from my bedroom door. Just ended. Dirt giving way to my normal carpet. Like the trail was in the process of forming. Like it was growing. Extending. I called my landlord. Told him there was damage to my apartment. That somehow dirt and debris had gotten into my hallway. Could he come look? He arrived 20 minutes later. I showed him. Pointed to the trail. Look at this. All this dirt. This damage. I don't know how it got here. He looked at my hallway. Looked at me. Tyler, your hallway is fine. There's no dirt. No damage. What are you talking about? Right there. The trail. The dirt path. You don't see it. I see carpet. Normal carpet. Are you feeling okay? I looked. And yes, I could still see it. Clear as day. A dirt trail. Roots. Rocks. Forest debris. But my landlord saw nothing. Just normal hallway. Just normal carpet. Never mind, I said. Sorry. Long day. I think I'm just tired. He left. Confused. Concerned. And I was alone with the trail. The trail only I could see. The trail that smelled like the Smokies. The trail that was in my apartment where no trail should be. I avoided it that night. Stepped carefully around it. Went to my bedroom. Locked the door. Tried to sleep. But I could smell it. Even through the closed door. Forest smell. Alum cave smell. The trail was there. Growing. Eating. The next morning, August 15th, the trail was longer. It had grown overnight. Now it extended 15 feet from my front door, closer to my bedroom. And it had changed. There were small plants now. Ferns. Moss. Vegetation I recognized from the Alum Cave Trail. Growing out of the dirt. In my hallway. In my apartment. I took photos. Documented it. The photos showed normal carpet. No trail. No dirt. No plants. Like my camera couldn't see what I saw. Like the trail existed only for me. I went to work. Tried to act normal. Tried to focus on my job. But all I could think about was the trail. The trail in my apartment. The trail that was growing. The trail that was bringing the forest into my home. That night, August 15th, I heard something. Around 3 a.m., I woke up, heard footsteps. In my hallway. On the trail. Someone walking. Slow. Steady. Deliberate. Walking the trail that ended at my bedroom door. I listened. The footsteps approached. Got closer. Stopped right outside my door. I could see shadows under the door. Something standing there. Something that had walked the trail. Something that had followed me home. I didn't open the door. Didn't move. Just lay in bed. Listening. Watching the shadows. Waiting. After 5 minutes, the footsteps retreated. Walked back down the trail. Back toward my front door. Then silence. In the morning, the trail was longer again. 20 feet now. Almost to my bedroom door. And there were footprints in the dirt. Human-shaped. Bare feet. Walking from my front door to my bedroom door. Then back again. Someone had walked the trail. Someone I couldn't see. Someone who walked at 3 a.m. This pattern continued. Every night, the trail grew. Every night at 3 a.m., footsteps. Every morning, the trail was closer. The forest was deeper. The presence was stronger. August 20th. The trail reached my bedroom door. Ended right at the threshold. And the footprints stopped there too. Like whatever was walking was waiting. Testing the boundary. Seeing if the trail would continue into my bedroom. Seeing if it could follow me all the way. That night, 3 a.m., the footsteps came. But this time they didn't retreat. They stopped at my door. And I heard something new. Scratching. On my door. Fingernails on wood. Slow. Patient. Like whatever was there was trying to get in. Trying to open the door. Trying to continue the trail. I turned on my light. The scratching stopped. The shadows under my door disappeared. But in the morning, there were marks. Scratch marks on my bedroom door. Deep. Real. Visible even to my landlord when I showed him. Physical evidence that something had been there. Something that wanted in. Animal, my landlord said. Maybe a raccoon got into the building. I'll set traps. But I knew better. This wasn't an animal. This was whatever had followed me from the Alum Cave Trail. Whatever had created the trail in my hallway. Whatever walked at 3 a.m. Whatever wanted into my bedroom. I went back to the Smokies. Back to the Alum Cave Trail. I needed to understand. Needed to find out what I'd brought home. Needed to figure out how to stop it. I hiked the trail again. August 22nd. This time I was looking for something specific. Looking for anything unusual. Anything wrong. Anything that would explain why a trail could follow me home. At the 3-mile mark, the same place where I'd first felt followed, I found it. A side trail. Small. Unmarked. Leading off into the forest. I'd hiked this trail dozens of times. This side trail had never been there before. Or I'd never noticed it. Or it had recently appeared. I followed it. The side trail wound through dense forest. Got narrower. Darker. More overgrown. After about a quarter mile, it ended at a clearing. And in the clearing was a cabin. Old. Abandoned. Rotting. I approached. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. Inside was a single room. Empty except for writing on the walls. Carved into the wood. Hundreds of messages. Dozens of dates. All from different people. All saying similar things. The trail followed me home, 1987. It's in my house, 1993. I can't make it stop, 2001. The footsteps come every night, 2008. It's at my bedroom door, 2015. Decades of messages. Decades of people experiencing the same thing. The trail following them home. The presence. The footsteps, the scratching, all of it documented in this abandoned cabin. And on the newest wall, freshest carving, dated August 2021. It wants to complete the trail. Don't let it into your bedroom. I carved my own message. Tyler Morrison, August 2021. How do I stop it? I waited, hoping for an answer. Hoping whoever had carved the recent message would return. Would help. Would explain. Nothing. Just the cabin. Just the messages. Just the evidence that I wasn't alone. That this had happened before. That others had been followed. That the trail was something real. Something recurring. Something that attached to certain people for reasons unknown. I left. Hiked back to the main trail. Back to my truck. Back to Knoxville. Back to my apartment. Back to the trail in my hallway that was waiting. Growing. Approaching calm. Completion. August 25th. The trail had entered my bedroom. Just a few inches past the threshold. But it had crossed. Had continued. The dirt path was in my bedroom now. Growing toward my bed. And the vegetation was thicker. Small trees. Saplings. Mushrooms. The forest was establishing itself in my apartment. That night, 3 a.m., the footsteps came into my bedroom. I woke to the sound, opened my eyes, and saw it. A figure, standing at the foot of my bed, on the trail, on the dirt path that now extended from my front door to my bedside. It looked human, almost, but wrong proportions. Too tall, too thin, arms too long, and it was made of forest. Bark for skin, moss for hair, eyes like holes in a tree trunk. It was the trail given form. The forest condensed into human shape. It looked at me, didn't speak, didn't move, just looked. And I understood. It wanted to complete the trail, wanted the path to go all the way. From the Alum Cave Trail in the Smokies to my bed. A connection, a link, a trail that existed in two places at once. What do you want? I whispered. It raised one long arm, pointed, at me, then at the trail, then back at the forest visible through my window. It wanted me to walk the trail, to complete the connection, to go from my bed down the trail, through my apartment, and somehow back to the Smokies. It wanted the trail to be a loop, a circle, a permanent connection between the forest and my home. No, I said. You can't have this. Can't have my home. Can't have me. It tilted its head, almost sad, almost disappointed. Then it walked backward, retreated down the trail, back through my bedroom door, back down my hallway, back toward my front door. And as it walked, the trail behind it faded, disappeared. The dirt became carpet again. The plants withered. The forest smell dissipated. By the time it reached my front door, the trail was gone. Completely. My apartment looked normal again. No dirt, no vegetation, no evidence anything had been there. The figure stood at my door, looked back at me one last time, then opened the door. Without touching it, it just opened and walked out. Into the hallway. Into nothing. Into wherever it came from. The trail is gone from my apartment. Has been gone for 2 years now. But I know it's not over. Because sometimes late at night, I smell it. Forest. Dirt. Decomposing leaves. The Alum Cave Trail. Just a faint whiff. Just a reminder. And sometimes I see small signs. A few grains of dirt on my carpet. A tiny fern growing in my bathroom. A root pushing up through my kitchen floor. The trail trying to reestablish. The forest trying to return. I don't hike the Alum Cave Trail anymore. Don't go near that 3-mile mark. Don't risk feeling that sensation again. That feeling of being followed. That attachment that brings trails home. But I know it's still there. The side trail. The cabin. The messages. The entity that creates connections between the forest and people's homes. The thing that wants to complete trails. To link places. To bring the Smokies into the world beyond the park. And I know I'm not the only one. The messages in the cabin prove that. Dozens of people over decades. All experiencing the same thing. All having trails follow them home. All fighting to keep the forest from establishing in their living space. I don't know what it is. Don't know what it wants. Don't know why it chooses certain people. But I know it's still active. Still following hikers. Still creating trails. Still trying to complete connections. If you hike the Alum Cave Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains, Pay attention at the 3-mile mark. If you feel followed, if you sense presence, if something seems to walk behind you matching your pace, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. Don't let it attach. Because if it does, it will follow you home. It will create a trail. It will bring the forest to wherever you live. And it will walk that trail every night at 3 a.m. Getting closer, getting stronger, trying to complete the connection, trying to link the Smokies to your bedroom. And once that connection is complete, I don't know what happens. The messages in the cabin don't say. The people who let it finish don't report back. They just disappear from the record. Stop leaving messages. Stop fighting. Stop existing in any searchable way. Maybe they walk the trail. Maybe they complete the loop. Maybe they end up back in the Smokies. Permanently. Forever hiking the Alum Cave Trail. Forever part of the forest. Forever connected. I don't know. Don't want to know. Don't want to find out. I said no. I rejected the connection. I made the trail disappear. But I'm marked now. I'm on its list. I'm someone who saw it. Someone who refused it. Someone who might change their mind. And sometimes when I smell that forest smell, when I see those small signs, I wonder if I made the right choice. If rejecting it just delayed the inevitable. If the trail will return. If next time I won't be strong enough to say no. If next time I'll walk the trail. Complete the connection. Become part of the forest. Forever linked. Forever hiking. Forever home. The Alum Cave Trail is beautiful. I loved hiking it. But I'll never hike it again. Because I know what walks there. What attaches there. What follows home. And I know that somewhere at the 3-mile mark, a side trail still exists. Leading to a cabin. Where a message waits. Carved in August 2021. Asking how to stop it. Waiting for an answer that might never come. I hiked Alum Cave Trail in the Smokies. Mile 3, felt followed. Got home. Knoxville. 200 miles away. There was a trail in my hallway. Dirt path. Tree roots. The exact trail I'd just hiked. From my front door toward my bedroom. Landlord saw nothing. Only I could see it. Every night grew longer. Every night 3 a.m. Footsteps. Something walking the trail. August 20th. Trail reached my bedroom door. August 25th. Trail entered my bedroom. 3 a.m. Figure standing on it. Made of bark and moss. It pointed at me. Wanted me to walk the trail. Complete the connection. Link my home to the Smokies. Permanently. I said no. Trail disappeared. Found cabin in Smokies. Dozens of messages. Trail followed me home. 1987. Can't stop it. 2001. Happens to many. Something attaches at mile 3. Brings forest to your home. Wants to complete the loop. I met another ranger on the trail who looked exactly like me. Same face. Same uniform. Same badge number. He said he was me. Said I was the imposter. Said he'd been working at Shenandoah for 3 years. I've been here for 3 years. We can't both be real. One of us is lying. One of us doesn't belong. And I'm starting to think it might be M.E. My name is Jonathan Pierce. At least, I think it is. I've been a ranger at Shenandoah National Park for 3 years. At least, I think I have. But after what happened on June 12th, 2022, I'm not sure of anything anymore. Not my name. Not my history. Not even whether I'm real. June 12th. I was hiking the Old Rag Mountain Trail. Routine patrol. The trail was busy. Sunday, good weather, lots of hikers. I was checking in with people, making sure everyone had proper gear, answering questions. Standard ranger work. At about the 2.5-mile mark, near the rock scramble section, I saw him. Another ranger. Coming down the trail while I was going up. Not unusual. Shenandoah has plenty of rangers. Seeing another one on a popular trail is completely normal. But as we got closer, something felt wrong. He looked familiar. Very familiar. And not just in the way all rangers in the same uniform look similar. He looked like me. We stopped when we reached each other. And I saw his face clearly. It was my face. Exact same features. Same hair. Same eyes. Same everything. Like looking in a mirror. Like seeing my identical twin. Except I don't have a twin. Hi, I said. Uncertain. Confused. This is weird, but you look exactly like me. He stared at me. Same confusion on his face. Same uncertainty. Yeah, he said slowly. You look like me too. That's really strange. We stood there, two identical rangers, looking at each other, both equally confused, both equally disturbed. I'm Jonathan Pierce, I said. Ranger at Shenandoah. 3 years. His face went pale. I'm Jonathan Pierce. Ranger at Shenandoah. 3 years. That's impossible. I'm Jonathan Pierce. No, I am. I've been here since 2019. I know this park. I know my life. I know who I am. So do I. I'm Jonathan Pierce. I've been here since 2019. This is my 3rd season. This is my job. This is my identity. We stared at each other, both claiming the same name, same job, same history, both completely convinced we were real, both completely confused about who the other was. I pulled out my ID, showed him. Name, Jonathan Pierce. Photo, my face. Badge number 4782. He pulled out his ID. Name, Jonathan Pierce. Photo, his face, which was my face. Badge number 4782. Same badge number. Same everything. Identical credentials. Both official. Both real. Both impossible. One of us is lying, he said. One of us is impersonating a ranger, using stolen identity, pretending to be someone they're not. It's not me, I said. I'm real. I'm Jonathan Pierce. I remember my whole life. My childhood. My training. My 3 years here. All of it. So do I. Every detail. Every memory. I remember becoming a ranger. I remember my first day at Shenandoah. I remember everything. You're the fake. You're the one who doesn't belong. Prove it. Tell me something only the real Jonathan Pierce would know. Fine. My mother's name is Margaret. My father died in 2018. I have a sister named Emily. I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2016. I became a ranger because I wanted to protect wilderness. I've been stationed at Shenandoah since May 2019. I live in Luray, apartment on Main Street, Unit 3B. I drive a blue Ford Ranger. License plate VGR 4821. Want me to keep going? Every detail was correct. Every fact was accurate. He knew things only I should know. Personal things. Private things. Things that proved he was Jonathan Pierce. But so was I. I knew all those same things. Had all those same memories. Was living in that same apartment. Driving that same truck. This doesn't make sense, I said. We can't both be real. I know. So which of us is the copy? Which of us is the fake? Which of us is the thing that's pretending to be Jonathan Pierce? Thing. The word hung in the air. Because that's what this implied. If we were both identical, both had the same memories, both believed we were real, then one of us wasn't human. One of us was something else. Something that could copy a person perfectly. Something that could replicate identity. Something that could become someone else. Let's go to headquarters, I suggested. Let the supervisors figure this out. They'll know which of us is real. AG. Reed. We hiked down together. Side by side. Two identical rangers. Not speaking. Both thinking. Both wondering. Both afraid. We reached headquarters. Walked in together. Approached the duty ranger at the desk, Mark Castellano, supervisor I'd worked with for THRE. Years. Mark, I said. We have a situation. This ranger claims to be me. Claims to be Jonathan Pierce. Same name. Same badge number. Same everything. One of us is an imposter. Jonathan, he said, looking at me. Come with me. Private office. Now. He led me into a back room. Closed the door. Sat down. Gestured for me to sit. Jonathan, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you remember what happened 3 weeks ago? May 23rd. May 23rd? I don't. What happened May 23rd? You disappeared. For 6 hours. You were on patrol in the backcountry. You radioed in at 9 a.m., saying you were checking the Rose River Falls area. Then nothing. No radio contact. No response. We organized a search. Found you at 3 p.m. sitting at the falls. You were disoriented, confused, said you'd lost time. Couldn't remember what happened between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. I didn't remember this. Had no memory of disappearing. No memory of lost time. No memory of being found at Rose River Falls. I don't remember that, I said. We sent you home. Told you to take a few days off. You came back the following Monday. Seemed fine. Seemed normal. We didn't pursue it. Assumed it was exhaustion or dehydration or stress. But now there's another me. Yes. And I'm wondering if what we found at Rose River Falls 3 weeks ago was actually you. Or if it was something else. Something that took your place. Something that's been pretending to be you for 3 weeks. You think I'm the fake. You think the other Jonathan is real and I'm the copy. I don't know, but the timeline fits. The real Jonathan disappeared May 23rd. Something that looked like Jonathan came back. And now 3 weeks later, another Jonathan appears. Maybe the real one. Maybe trying to reclaim his identity. This is insane. I'm real. I remember my whole life. I remember being Jonathan Pierce. All of it. Do you remember May 23rd? No. But that doesn't mean I'm not real. That could be explained. Trauma. Stress. Medical ISS. UE. Or it could be explained by you being a copy. Something that was created May 23rd. Something that has Jonathan's memories up until that point, but nothing after because it didn't exist after. Something that thinks it's real but isn't. I stood up, backed away. No, I'm real. I'm Jonathan Pierce. I've been here for 3 years. I have a life, a history, an identity. I'm not a copy. I'm not a thing. Then prove it. Tell me something that happened after May 23rd. Something only the real Jonathan would know. I tried to remember the past 3 weeks. Tried to recall specific events. Specific conversations, specific experiences, but it was all blurry, vague, like trying to remember a dream. I knew I'd been working, knew I'd been doing patrols, but specific details? Gone, missing, absent. I can't. I don't remember specifics. But that doesn't mean anything. Memory doesn't work that way. You can't always recall specific details on demand. Or you can't recall them because they didn't happen to you, because you weren't there, because you were created May 23rd with all of Jonathan's memories up to that point. And the past 3 weeks are blank because you didn't exist yet. You didn't experience them. You're operating on autopilot, on programmed behavior, on what you think Jonathan would do. But you're not actually him. Stop saying that. I'm real. I'm me. I'm Jonathan Pierce. Mark looked at me with something like pity. Jonathan, I want to believe you. But if I have to choose between you and the other one, the one waiting in the lobby who remembers May 23rd, who remembers the past 3 weeks, who has continuous memories, I'm going to believe he's real. And that means you. Renat. They kept me in that office for hours. Asked questions. Tested my memories. Compared my answers to the other Jonathan's answers. And every test made it worse. Because the other Jonathan remembered things I didn't. Recent things. Things from the past 3 weeks. He remembered conversations with supervisors. Remembered patrols. Remembered specific incidents. All things I should remember if I was real. All things that were blah. And K for me. They decided. The other Jonathan was real. I was the copy. I was the thing that had replaced him. I was the imposter. They didn't know what to do with me. Couldn't arrest me. I hadn't committed a crime. Couldn't detain me. I had rights, even if I wasn't human. Couldn't explain me. There was no precedent for this. So they made me leave. told me to turn in my badge, told me to stop claiming to be Jonathan Pierce, told me to go away and let the real Jonathan reclaim his life. I left, walked out of Shenandoah National Park, walked away from my job, walked away from my identity, walked away from my life, because apparently it wasn't my life. It was his, the other Jonathan, the real one. I went to my apartment in Luray, Unit 3B on Main Street, my apartment, where I'd lived for 3 years, where I had furniture and belongings and a life. But when I got there, he was already there. The other Jonathan, moving in, reclaiming his space, taking back what was his. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, a mix of pity and revulsion, looking at his own copy, looking at the thing that had been pretending. To be him. I left, found a motel, paid cash, sat in a cheap room, tried to figure out what I was, tried to understand what had happened. If I'm a copy, how was I created? By what? By whom? For what purpose? If I'm not real, why do I feel real? Why do I have consciousness? Why do I experience thoughts and emotions and sensations just like a real person? If I'm a thing, why do I have his memories, his personality, his identity? What's the difference between a perfect copy and the original? These questions consumed me. For days, for weeks. I couldn't let go, couldn't accept that I wasn't real, couldn't believe I was just a copy. A fake, a thing. I found reports, witness statements, other rangers describing what they found when they located Jonathan at 3 p.m. on May 23rd. They described someone sitting at the falls, staring into the water, not responding when called, not recognizing people, like he'd been reset, like he was a blank slate being programmed, like he was being filled with memories and identity, creating a copy, making a replacement, producing a duplicate Jonathan Pierce. But why? What's the purpose? Why replace a ranger? Why create a copy? I don't have answers. Don't have explanations. All I have are questions and the terrible uncertainty of my own existence. Am I real? Am I Jonathan Pierce? Or am I a copy? A fake? A thing that thinks it's human but isn't? I don't know. Can't know. Because from my perspective, I'm completely real. I have continuous consciousness. I have memories. I have identity. I have self-awareness. What's the difference between me and a real person? If the copy is perfect, if the imitation is exact, does it matter which came first? But society has decided. Shenandoah has decided. The real Jonathan has decided. I'm the copy. I'm the fake. I'm the one who doesn't belong. And I have to live with that. Have to exist knowing I'm not supposed to exist. Knowing I'm a duplicate. Knowing that somewhere in Shenandoah, the real Jonathan Pierce is working my job, living my life, being me better than I can because he's actually real. And I have to wonder, how many others are there? How many other copies? How many other rangers who lost time and came back different? How many other people working in national parks who are actually replacements? Duplicates? Things that look human but aren't. I think it's more common than anyone realizes. I think something in the Appalachians creates copies, replaces people, duplicates rangers, and we never know, because the copies are perfect, the replacements are exact. The duplicates have all the memories and personality and identity of the originals. So how would you know? How would anyone know? If your coworker lost time and came back slightly different, would you notice? Would you care? Or would you just assume they were tired, stressed, having a bad day? Why? The copies walk among us, work beside us, live in our communities, and we never know, because they're perfect imitations, perfect replacements, perfect duplicates. And maybe you're one of them. Maybe you've lost time you can't account for. Maybe you have gaps in your memory. Maybe you're actually a copy created to replace someone, and you'd never know. Because from your perspective, you're completely real, completely authentic, completely you. Just like I thought I was completely Jonathan Pierce, until I met the real one, until I was told I was the fake, until I learned I was the copy. Now I'm no one, have no identity, have no life. Just a duplicate trying to figure out what I am and why I exist. That's the worst part. Not being told you're a copy, but not knowing the purpose. Not understanding why. Not knowing what you're supposed to do now that you know you're not are. Eel. I'm still out here. Still in Virginia. Still near the Appalachians. Still wondering. Still questioning. Still trying to figure out what I am. And if you work in Appalachian parks, if you've ever lost time, if you've ever had gaps in your memory, maybe you should wonder too. Maybe you should question. Maybe you should consider that you might not be who you think you are. You might be the copy, and the real you might be somewhere else. Living your life. Being you. While you exist in limbo. Neither real nor fake. Neither human nor thing. Just a duplicate. A replacement. A copy that thinks it's original. Welcome to my existence. Welcome to the uncertainty. Welcome to being a copy who believes they're real. It's a special kind of hell, and it's happening more often than you think. In the Appalachians, people get replaced. Rangers get duplicated. Identities get copied. And we never know until it's too late. Until we meet our originals. Until we're told we're not real. By then, the damage is done. The copy exists. The duplicate is conscious. The replacement has identity. And there's no putting that back. No erasing it. No making it go away. We just exist. Forever wondering. Forever questioning. Forever uncertain. Are we real? Or are we copies? From our perspective, there's no difference. But everyone else can tell. Everyone else knows. Everyone else sees the truth. We're not real. We're duplicates. We're the Rangers who weren't. There's a sound in Mammoth Cave that shouldn't exist. It's not water dripping. Not rocks settling. Not bats. It's something else. Something that echoes from the deepest chambers. Something that sounds like words. Like voices. Like something trying to speak. And if you listen too long, it gets inside your head. It speaks to you. It calls you deeper. It makes you want to go to places no human has ever been. To find the source. To answer. My name is Lauren Foster, and I was a cave guide at Mammoth Cave National Park for 2 years. Was. Past tense. Because what happened in September 2019 ended my career. Ended my ability to go underground. Ended my relationship with caves forever. Mammoth Cave is the longest cave system in the world. Over 400 miles of surveyed passages. And that's just what we've mapped. There are unexplored sections. Areas we haven't reached. Chambers that might not have seen human presence in thousands of years. Or ever. September 18th, 2019. I was leading a wild cave tour. These are different from the regular tours. Smaller groups, more challenging routes, hours spent deep underground. This particular tour was going to a section called Gothic Avenue, about 2 miles into the cave system, 300 feet below the surface. There were 6 people in my group, all experienced cavers, all properly equipped, all excited to see parts of Mammoth most visitors never experience. We descended, navigated narrow passages, crawled through tight spaces, climbed over breakdown, collapsed rock formations. Everything normal, everything routine. I'd led this tour dozens of times, knew every turn, every landmark, every hazard. At about the 1.5-mile mark, I heard it. A sound, faint, distant, coming from deeper in the cave, from a direction we weren't headed, from unexplored or rarely visited sections. It sounded like singing, or chanting, or some kind of vocalization. Rhythmic, musical, but wrong. The pitch was off. The melody was unsettling, and it echoed strangely through the cave, making it impossible to determine direction or distance. Does anyone else hear that? I asked the group. They stopped, listened. Some heard it. Some didn't. Those who did were confused. What is that? Is someone else in the cave? No. We're the only tour in this section today. And it's coming from an area that's not open to visitors. We continued, but the sound didn't fade. It grew louder. Not by much. Just incrementally. like whatever was making it was getting closer, or we were getting closer to it. At Gothic Avenue, we stopped for a break. The sound was clearer here, more distinct, and I could make out something that hadn't been apparent before. It wasn't random. It had structure, pattern, like language, like someone speaking in a voice that was almost human, but not quite. One of my group members, a woman named Patricia, looked disturbed. "I can understand it," she said quietly. "I don't know how, but I can understand what it's saying." "What's it saying?" "It's calling, inviting, asking us to come deeper, to find the source, to join." "Join what?" "I don't know. It's not clear. But it wants us to come, to go farther into the cave, to places we haven't been, to find it." I should have ended the tour there, should have turned us around, should have gotten everyone out immediately. But I was curious, wanted to know what was making the sound, wanted to understand what Patricia was hearing, wanted to investigate. "We're going to continue the tour," I said, "but we're staying on the planned route. We're not deviating. We're not exploring. We just complete the tour and exit." "Understood." Everyone agreed, but I could see Patricia was struggling. She kept looking toward the passages that led deeper, kept tilting her head like she was listening, kept taking steps in directions we weren't going. We continued through Gothic Avenue. The sound persisted, got louder, more insistent, more clear, and now more of the group could hear words, could understand meaning, could feel the pull to go deeper, to find the source, to answer the call. At the 2-mile mark, Patricia broke away from the group, just started walking, toward a passage we weren't using, toward unexplored territory, toward wherever the sound was coming from. "Patricia, stop," I called. "That's not our route. We need to stay together." She didn't respond, just kept walking, like she was in a trance, like the sound had complete control, like she wasn't making her own decisions anymore. I went after her, caught up, grabbed her arm. "Patricia, we need to go back. You can't go this way. It's not safe. We don't know what's down there." She turned to me. Her eyes were wrong, dilated, unfocused. "It's calling me. I have to go. I have to find it. I have to answer." "No, we're going back. Now." I pulled her, physically dragged her back to the group. She resisted, fought, tried to break free. The other group members helped. We restrained her, got her facing the exit direction, started moving back toward the surface. But the sound followed us, got louder, more aggressive, more demanding, and I could understand it now too, could hear the words, could comprehend the meaning. "Come back, come deeper, come find us, come join us, come be part of the cave, come be part of the sound, come be one of us." Us, plural. There were multiple things making the sound, multiple voices, multiple entities, all calling, all inviting, all wanting us to come deeper. We moved faster. Urgency now. Fear. The sound was pursuing, growing, intensifying, and more of the group were being affected, turning back, looking toward the deep, fighting against me, fighting against exit, fighting to answer the call. I radioed for assistance. "This is Guide Foster. Wild Cave Tour in Gothic Avenue. Medical situation. Multiple group members experiencing altered mental states. Need immediate extraction assistance." The response was garbled, distorted, like the sound was interfering with radio transmission, like it didn't want us calling for help, like it wanted us isolated, alone with it, vulnerable to its call. We reached the 1-mile mark, still 300 feet underground, still a long way from surface, and the sound was overwhelming now, so loud it was physical, vibrating through rock, through air, through our bodies, through our minds. Patricia broke free again, ran, back toward the deep. 2 other group members followed, all 3 running, desperate to answer, desperate to find the source, desperate to join whatever was calling. I couldn't stop all 3, could barely stop one. I grabbed Patricia again. Let the other two go. Had to make a choice. Had to save who I could. Had to prioritize. Had to get the remaining 3 plus myself to surface. We ran, leaving 2 people behind, leaving them to the sound, to whatever was calling, to whatever they were so desperate to find. It was wrong. It was terrible, but it was necessary, for saved was better than none. We reached the surface at 4:17 p.m., emerged into daylight, into silence. The sound was gone, cut off the moment we exited the cave, like it couldn't exist in daylight, like it was confined to underground, like it only had power in darkness and depth. I reported immediately. 3 people missing in Gothic Avenue, affected by some kind of auditory phenomenon, experiencing compulsion to go deeper. 2 people actively pursuing, 1 restrained and extracted. Emergency rescue needed. They organized a team, went back in, searched Gothic Avenue, searched the passages beyond, searched for hours, found nothing. No sign of Patricia's 2 companions, no evidence they'd been there, no footprints, no disturbances, no bodies, just empty cave. The sound was gone too. The rescue team reported complete silence. No vocalizations, no calling, no singing, just normal cave sounds, just water and settling rock and their own breathing. The 2 missing people, Thomas and Rachel, were never found. The official report said they got separated from the group, became disoriented, and died somewhere in the unexplored sections. Their bodies would likely never be recovered. The cave is too vast, too complex, too deep. But I know the truth. They didn't get lost. They didn't die of exposure or injury. They found it. They reached the source of the sound. They answered the call. And whatever was calling took them, made them part of it, made them one of the voices. Because 2 weeks later, I went back to the cave. Couldn't help myself. Had to know. Had to understand. Had to hear if the sound was still there. I went alone, off duty, without permission, descended into Gothic Avenue, went to the 2-mile mark, to where Patricia had first broken away, where the sound had been strongest. And I heard it, still there, still calling, still inviting, but different now. More voices, the same pattern but more participants, more entities making the sound, more things calling from the deep. And among those voices I recognized 2. Thomas, Rachel, their voices, their patterns, their tones. They were part of the sound now, part of the calling, part of whatever exists in the deepest parts of Mammoth Cave, part of what recruits, part of what takes people, part of what grows. I ran, got out, never went back, quit my job the next day, moved away from Kentucky, moved away from caves, moved away from anywhere underground, because I know what's down there, know what's calling, know what it does to people who listen too long. Mammoth Cave is beautiful, spectacular, one of nature's greatest wonders, but it's also occupied by something old, something that exists in the deepest, darkest, most isolated chambers, something that calls to people, something that wants them to come deeper, to join, to become part of the sound. And every year, people disappear in Mammoth Cave. Not many, 1 or 2, sometimes more. Always deep, always in remote sections, always when they're listening to something, responding to something, following something only they can hear. The official explanations are logical, natural. People get lost. People get injured. People make mistakes. The cave is vast and dangerous. Accidents happen. But I know better. No, it's not accidents. It's the sound, the calling, the invitation to go deeper, to find the source, to join whatever is making the vocalization that echoes through 400 miles of surveyed passages and who knows how many more unsurveyed. If you visit Mammoth Cave, stay on the marked tours. Stay with your group. Stay in the well-lit, frequently visited sections. And if you hear something that sounds like singing or chanting or voices in a language you shouldn't understand, don't listen. Don't try to comprehend. Don't follow. Don't answer. Because once you understand what it's saying, Once you hear the invitation, once you feel the pull to go deeper, you're already being taken, already being converted, already becoming part of the sound. And someday, your voice will join the others, calling from the deep, inviting new people, new recruits, new additions to whatever exists in the parts of Mammoth Cave that humans haven't mapped, haven't explored, haven't survived. The sound is still there, still calling, still waiting, still growing, one voice at a time. Don't be the next one. Don't listen. Don't answer. Don't go deep. Because the cave remembers. The sound remembers. And once you're part of it, you call forever. The first time I heard the fiddle, I was standing barefoot in a creek, and I had no memory of walking there. The water was so cold it should have woken the dead, but I didn't feel it at all. I only heard the music, a lonesome, sawing reel that curled down the ridgeline like wood smoke, in perfect time with the pulse beating in my ears. It sounded like a dance tune my grandfather might have played, all double stops and mournful drones, and it was coming from somewhere up the mountain where no trail existed. I stood in that creek until the last note faded into the hiss of the wind through the spruce. Then I looked down at my bare feet planted among the stones, and I started to shake. I'd gone to sleep in my bunk an hour after sundown. It was now 1:15 midnight. Something had called me out of my cabin and into the water, and I'd followed it like a dog on a leash. My name is Alden Cross, and for 9 years I've been a backcountry ranger for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, stationed out of the Balsam Cove Guard Station, one of the most remote duty posts east of the Mississippi. The cabin sits at 5,200 feet in a hanging valley on the North Carolina side of the park, accessible only by a 6-mile hike from the nearest gravel road. It was built in 1936 by the Civilian Conservation Corps, hand-hewn chestnut logs, a stone chimney that drew perfectly, a porch that looked straight down a drainage, so steep the sun set at 3 in the afternoon. My job was managing the high-elevation zone around Eagle Head Mountain and the headwaters of Lost Cove Creek, maintaining 27 miles of trail, monitoring spruce fir moss spider habitat, pulling illegal campers, and generally keeping people alive in terrain that did not care whether they lived or die. I'd been at Balsam Cove for 4 seasons. I knew the sound of every thrush, every squirrel, every widowmaker leaning in the wind. Before that October, the strangest thing I'd ever encountered was a black bear that had learned to unscrew the lid of a bear canister, and even that had a rational explanation. I was not the kind of person who believed in haints, boogers, or anything that went bump in the backcountry. The Smokies are old, yes, and they can feel haunted if you're tired and alone, but that's just the human mind painting faces on the dark. That's what I told myself. That's what I kept telling myself right up until the moment I found the first body posed on a lichen-covered rock with a fiddle string wound around its WR. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Let me back up to the beginning, to the day I drove up the Park Service Road to the Balsam Cove trailhead with a cooler of food and a duffel bag full of wool socks. It was the first week of October, and the autumn color was ripening down in the coves, maples going scarlet, hickories turning gold, the understory sumac burning a deeper red than anything that grows outside the southern Appalachians. I loaded my pack, signed the ranger register at the trailhead kiosk, and started the 6-mile hump up to the station with 70 pounds on my back and a chainsaw file tucked in my chest pocket. The trail followed Lost Cove Creek for the first 3 miles, a tumble of whitewater that roared so loud you couldn't hear yourself think. Then it broke away and climbed through a series of switchbacks cut into the mountain's flank, passing through tunnels of rhododendron so thick they turned midday into chui. Light. At the 2-mile mark, I noticed something wrong. A pile of creek stones had been stacked in the center of the trail, each stone carefully chosen and nested, and at the apex sat a broken fiddle bough. Just the stick, the horsehair dangling in wet, tangled threads. The wood was dark with age, but the break was fresh, splintered pale. I turned it over in my hands. No one lived within 10 miles. The last through hiker, had signed out 3 days ago. I assumed some local kid had been playing folk musician in the woods and left his busted gear as art. I set the bow stick to the side of the trail and continued climbing. I should have buried it. I should have scattered those stones and said a prayer over the pieces. But I didn't know the rules yet. The cabin looked the same as it always did, squat, solid, the moss on the roof glowing emerald in the damp light. I unlocked the door with the key kept under the loose porch board, lit the kerosene lamp, and checked the radio. The district ranger on duty, a woman named Celia Ruiz, answered my check-in with her usual brisk cheerfulness. "Copy you, Cross. Weather report says a high-pressure system is parked over the Smokies for at least a week. First freeze predicted around the 15th. You good on supplies?" I told her I was fine, shut down the radio, and swept out the mouse droppings that had accumulated since the last ranger rotated out. The cabin smelled of old wood smoke and pine resin, and the single window looked out on a wall of Fraser firs that stood like Sentinel's eye. And the fog. The previous ranger had left a note tucked into the logbook. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Miriam Vance, a veteran backcountry ranger who'd oriented me my first season. "Alden, keep an eye on the Eaglehead Spur Trail. There's a dead hemlock leaning at about 30 degrees that I didn't have time to drop. Should be fine through the season, but I wouldn't camp under it. Also, if you hear music at night, don't follow it. Old story from the CCC boys. Just hum a hymn and it'll pass." I laughed. Miriam had a wicked dry sense of humor, the kind you develop after 20 years of solo postings. I crumpled the note and used it to start the fire. That's the second thing I shall. Diev kept. The first 5 days were textbook backcountry management. I hiked the Eaglehead Loop with a chainsaw and cleared 3 deadfalls left by a summer microburst. I did a Pika inventory, not Pika exactly, but the analogy is close. I was surveying spruce fir moss spiders, counting their webs on the north-facing slopes. I spoke to exactly 2 groups of backpackers, both of whom were grateful for the solitude and slightly unnerved by the quiet. "I haven't heard a bird in 2 days," one woman told me, a middle-aged hiker from Nashville with an expensive ultralight pack and a worried expression. "Is that normal?" I told her the birds were probably migrating lower for the season, which was true mostly. I didn't tell her I'd noticed the silence too, a muffled hush that had settled over the forest like a blanket. I didn't tell her I'd started humming to myself on the trail just to fill the space. On the 6th night, the fiddle woke me again. This time I didn't walk out of the cabin, but I sat bolt upright in my bunk with my heart slamming against my ribs. The music was clearer than before, a slow, mournful waltz in a minor key, and underneath the melody ran a low drone like the hum of bees trapped in a hollow tree. It was coming from the direction of Eaglehead Summit, about 2 miles west. I sat frozen, listening, while the rational parts of my brain tried to assemble explanations. A hiker with a portable speaker, a weird acoustical trick of the wind through the rock formations, my own tired mind conjuring sounds from the white noise of the creek. But the music had structure. It had phrasing and vibrato, the unmistakable touch of a human hand on strings. And it was calling me. I felt it in my sternum, a physical pull, a desire to stand up and walk toward that sound that was stronger than any hunger or thirst I'd ever experienced. My feet were on the floor before I caught missile. No, I said out loud, and the word sounded thin and foolish in the empty cabin. I grabbed my copy of the Wilderness First Responder Manual and began reading aloud from the chapter on hypothermia. I read until the music stopped, which was just before dawn, and when the sun finally slid over the ridge, I realized I'd been gripping the book so hard I'd torn the cover. I radioed Ruiz the next morning and asked if there had been any reports of backcountry campers with musical instruments. She checked the permit logs. "None." "Why, you hearing banjos in the holler?" she joked. I forced a laugh and said it must have been a dream. The first body turned up 2 days later, on October 12th. I was walking the Eaglehead Spur to check that leaning hemlock Miriam had mentioned when I noticed a shape on the ground near the base of the tree. At first I thought it was an abandoned pack, but then I saw the angle of the limbs and the pale oval of a face staring up at the branches. It was a man, lying on his back on a flat bed of moss, his hands folded across his chest like a saint on a tomb effigy. He was dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, no hiking gear, no pack, no water bottle. His shoes, well-worn work boots, were placed neatly side by side next to him. His eyes were open, fixed on the canopy, and his expression was not peaceful. It was rapt, the transfixed look of someone listening to the most beautiful sound they'd ever heard. And wrapped around his right wrist was a single strand of gut fiddle string, tied so tightly it had cut into the skin, the ends trailing like a broken thread. I checked for a pulse even though the skin temperature told me he'd been dead for at least a day. Nothing. No rigor, no lividity, none of the normal post-mortem markers. The body was cool and waxy, but there was no decomposition. I forced myself to photograph the scene, document the position, and note the absence of tracks. The moss around the body was pristine, no footprints, no drag marks. The only disturbance was the fiddle string and a carving I found on the hemlock trunk above his head. Two mirrored curves, like a violin's F-hole, gouged into the bark so fresh that sap still beaded in the wound. I'd never seen that symbol before, and yet it felt familiar in a way that made my stoma clench. I called it in. Celia Ruiz's voice went flat and professional. Copy, Cross. Stay on scene. I'm sending Ellie and a coroner from Gatlinburg. They'll hike in from the trailhead. ETA 4 hours. She paused. The carving. You said it looked like a violin sound hole. I confirmed. Another pause. I'm going to pull the station history. There may be something in the old files. Stay safe. I stayed on the scene for 3 hours, flagging the perimeter and keeping my back to a sturdy tree. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, no distant water. And then, just as the sun began to dip, I heard the fiddle again, distant, reedy, drifting down from the summit. The dead man's fingers, I noticed, had curled slightly. I told myself it was post-mortem muscle contraction. I told myself a lot of things. The coroner and 2 law enforcement rangers arrived as the light failed. They bagged the body, took my statement, and hiked back out under the weight of a Stokes litter. I was told to stay at the station and await further instructions. Alone again, I did what any backcountry ranger with a bad feeling would do. I dug into the station's records. The Balsam Cove logbook went back to 1936, pages yellowed and stiff, filled with the looping cursive of decades of rangers. I traced backward from the most recent entries, looking for anything that mentioned music, carvings, fiddle strings. About 3/4 of the way through the book, I found it. An entry dated October 14th, 1938, signed by a ranger named Wendell Coffey. Found CCC Stonemason J. Amos Pritchett dead this morning on Eaglehead Rock. Body arranged with hands at chest, violin string around left wrist. No tracks. The men are saying it's the old curse from the cove, the devil's fiddler. They say Pritchett was the best fiddle player in the camp, that he used to go up to the rock to practice alone. The elder from the Qualla boundary told me the story. A man who plays alone in the high places, where the fog never lifts, who makes a pact if he plays through the night. The pact is, he plays for the mountain, and the mountain keeps him. Pritchett made the pact. Now the music won't stop, and the men are afraid it's calling them to dance. I hear it too. I hear it every night. The next entry, 2 days later. I hear it. I dream of dancing. My feet move in my sleep. I woke up last night standing on the porch with no shoes, facing the summit. The carving is on my doorframe now, 2 F-holes mirrored. I didn't put it there. I'm requesting immediate transfer. If you read this, do not listen to the music. Sing against it. The old woman said the devil's fiddler can't claim you if you refuse to dance and sing a sacred song. It's the only countercharm. God help me, I keep humming the tune. After that, the entries stopped. Wendell Coffey's name was crossed out in the station roster. A single word had been written in the margin by a later hand. Transferred, with the question mark underlined 3 times. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table with the logbook open, every lamp burning, and I sang every hymn I could remember from my grandmother's kitchen. Amazing grace, be thou my vision, I'll fly away, beating time with my hand on the tabletop to keep my feet still. Outside, the fog pressed against the window like a face, and twice I heard the slow, deliberate scrape of a bough across strings, so close it might have been on the porch. I sang louder. The scraping stopped, but the fog stayed. The second body was found by a search and rescue team 3 days later, half a mile below Eaglehead Rock in a thicket of mountain laurel. A woman named Delia Harker, a retired schoolteacher from Knoxville who'd been missing for 2 weeks. She was kneeling upright, hands raised as if holding an invisible violin in one hand and a bow in the other, her arms frozen in a posture of playing. Her neck was bent back, her eyes closed, her mouth curving in a smile that was almost blissful. And wound around her wrist, the left wrist this time, was another gut string tied in a precise bowline knot. The same carved F-hole symbol was etched into the rock above her head. When the news reached me over the radio, I felt the world tilt. 2 bodies, both posed as musicians, both wearing that string like a signature. The investigation that followed was a jurisdictional nightmare. Park Service, county, state, and the best explanation anyone could offer was a serial killer with a bizarre ritual. But no one could explain how the bodies had appeared on their respective rocks with no tracks, no signs of struggle, no cause of death beyond what the coroner called acute cardiac failure in the presence of extreme musical excitation, a phrase I'm still not sure exists in any medical textbook. Both victims, the coroner noted, had minor abrasions on their fingers, consistent with, and I quote, prolonged and vigorous violin playing. Neither had ever played a musical instrument in their lives. I was questioned, cleared, and put on administrative leave pending a psych evaluation. But I didn't leave the backcountry. I couldn't. The music had returned, and it was inside my head now, threading through my thoughts like a worm. It played when I was awake and when I slept. It was a reel, a waltz, a dirge, always the same melody, always in a minor key, always ending on a rising note that felt like a question. And my feet wanted to answer. They wanted to tap. They wanted to dance. I went to see the elder mentioned in Coffey's log, or at least her descendant. On the Qualla boundary, at the edge of the park, I found a woman named Ada Lacia in a small frame house with a garden full of dying cornstalks. She was old, maybe 90, with silver braids and eyes that saw right through me. I told her everything, the music, the bodies, the strings, the carving. She listened without expression, then handed me a cup of sassafras tea and sat down heavily in a rocking chair. "You got the fiddler on you," she said. My grandmother told of him. Name was Amos, a white boy from over by Cataloochee. CCC put him to work building trails. He played the fiddle like the devil himself taught him, and folks said he did learn it from the devil. He made a pact. He wanted to play forever, so the mountain took him up Eaglehead Rock one night and turned his music into a loop. Now his spirit walks the high ridges, playing his reel, and whoever hears it and dances, they belong to him. They join his invisible orchestra. He ties a string around them to mark them as his. The string is from his fiddle bow, the one he broke the night he died. She rocked, the runners creaking on the wooden floor. You can't stop him. He's older now than the trees. But you can refuse him. He can't make you dance. That's the one rule that holds him. So long as you don't dance, and so long as you keep singing the old sacred songs, he can't claim you. But the longer you hear his tune, the harder it is to remember your own song. That's the test. I asked her what happened if you failed. She looked me in the eye and said, "You'll find out when you find your own body on that rock, fiddle string on your wrist." I drove back to the trailhead and hiked the 6 miles to the station in a daze, the melody winding through my head. It was beautiful, I had to admit. It was the saddest and most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And by the time I reached Balsam Cove, I was humming it. I didn't even notice until I was inside the cabin with the door barred, and my own voice was tracing the notes like a bow on strings. October 20th was the night the first freeze arrived. The temperature dropped like a stone, and ice crystals feathered across the window pane. The fog rose from the valley and pooled around the cabin, knee-deep, as white and still as a sheet of parchment. I had the fire roaring, the lamps lit, the Wilderness First Responder book open on my lap, and I was singing Amazing Grace at the top of my lungs. I'd been singing for hours, my voice raw, my throat burning, but I didn't stop because every time I paused, the fiddle grew louder. At midnight, the knock came. Not at the door, at the window. A single tap of a bough against the glass. I turned and saw, beyond the frost, a figure standing in the fog. It was tall and thin, dressed in the faded khaki of a CCC work uniform. The trousers tucked into leather boots that left no prints in the icy mud. Its face was half there. I could see the suggestion of a young man's features, a sharp jaw, a thin mouth, but the details blurred like a reflection in rippled water. In its left hand it carried a fiddle, dark wood gleaming with moisture. In its right, a bow, the horsehair trailing loose and broken. It lifted the fiddle to its chin, and the stroke that followed was not a melody but a chord, a raw, dissonant chord that vibrated in my chest and stole my voice mid-verse. Alden Cross, it said, and its voice was the sound of the bow scraping the strings, a resinous whisper. You've heard my tune. You know it well by now. Why not dance? The night is cold, and the dance will keep you warm. The mountain needs another player. The orchestra is missing a bass line. My feet twitched. I grabbed the edge of the table and held on. I won't dance, I said, and my voice cracked. I know your name, Amos Pritchett. You made a deal, but I didn't. I don't consent. The figure tilted its head, and for a moment its blurred face resolved into something almost human. Hurt, maybe, or just curious. They never consent at first. But they all get tired, Ranger. They all forget the words to their hymns. Then it began to play again, not the mournful waltz this time, but a blistering, joyful reel that surged through the cabin like floodwater. My feet stamped before I could stop them, once, twice, and I felt the rhythm grab my hips, my spine. I was going to dance. I was going to dance, and then I belonged to the mountain. And then, from somewhere deep in my memory, my grandmother's voice rose up like a bell. Alden, honey, you sing when the devil comes calling. I opened my mouth and I didn't sing Amazing Grace. I sang the first thing that came to mind, an old Appalachian lullaby she'd taught me, a song about a sparrow flying home. Fly away, little bird, fly away home. It had no known melody, but I invented one on the spot, a counter melody that clashed with the fiddle, a discordant, offbeat tune that threw the reel into chaos. I stamped my foot not in rhythm but against it, a defiant stomp, and I sang the lullaby like a battle cry. The fiddler bow skipped. The cord splintered. The figure at the window flickered, and for one shattering second I saw what lay beneath the khaki and the half their face. A hollow thing, a husk stretched around a darkness that stirred like a nest of snakes. The fiddle screamed, a high, atonal note that stabbed my ears, and then the fog simply swallowed it. The window was empty. The frost on the glass had melted in the shape of two F-holes, side by side, dripping down the pane. I sang until my voice gave out, and when I finally stopped, I was alone in the cabin with the fire dying and the first gray light of dawn creeping over the ridge. The music was gone. For the first time in weeks, my head was silent. But the story doesn't end there. I'd like to tell you it does, that I packed out the next day, resigned my post, and moved to a city where the only music comes from car radios. But I didn't. I couldn't. The Smokies are in my blood, and I'd driven the fiddler away, but I knew he was still out there on Eagle Head Rock, playing his reel for whoever would listen. Someone had to stay. Someone had to warn the hikers, check the trail registers, and keep the hymns handy. So I stayed. I'm still here. I'm sitting on the porch of Balsam Cove Guard Station as I tell you this, watching the fog roll up Lost Cove Creek. It's the 1st of October again. I've oiled the door hinges, checked the radio, and stacked a fresh pile of hymnals by the fire. Every day I hike the Eaglehead Spur and check the hemlock for new carvings. Sometimes I find them, fresh F-holes, sap weeping, but no bodies. Not yet. The music hasn't returned. But I know it will. I can feel it in the stillness, in the way the birds go quiet at dusk, in the way my own fingers sometimes curl as if holding a bough when I'm half asleep. Last week, I found a fiddle string on the trail, tied in a small loop and tucked under the wiper blade of the parked truck I keep at the trailhead. There was a note with it, written in a spidery hand on a scrap of birch bark. You sang the sparrow song. That was clever. But the sparrow flies south in October. Who will sing for you when you forget the words? I burned the note, but I kept the string. I keep it in my pocket, coiled tight. Some nights, when the wind whips through the firs and the cabin creaks, I take it out and roll it between my fingers, and I catch myself humming that old lullaby. But the other melody, the reel, the waltz, the dirge with the rising question, is still there underneath, waiting. And I know, with a certainty that sits cold in my stomach, that one October night I'll wake to find my shoes off and my feet on the porch, and the fiddler standing patient in the fog with his broken bow raised in greeting. And on that night, I'll have to remember the words. I'll have to remember who I am. That's the thing about the devil's fiddler. He's patient. He's got nothing but time. And he knows that everyone eventually forgets the second verse. I'm still singing, but my voice is getting tired, and October's only just begun.
Friends, that was the story for today. I hope you enjoyed it and that it stayed with you in the best chilling way possible. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Your time and support truly mean more than you know. This channel is growing because of listeners like you. If you want more real and disturbing encounters like this, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel continue bringing these stories to life. And if this story gave you chills, let me know in the comments. I read them all, and your thoughts make this community stronger. Until next time, turn off the lights, double-check the room, and I'll see you in the next story.